The Controversial Catechism, Chapter 2, The Rise and Progress of Protestantism, drawn from the works of Luther himself. Section 1. What is Protestantism? A new religion, invented and propagated by a person called Luther. Why do you call it a new religion? Because, viewing it as a body of doctrine, no such divinity, either as to faith or morals, was ever known, taught, or believed by any sect in the world until Luther's time. Was not the same divinity taught some centuries earlier by the Albigensians, Waldensians, Hussites, and Wycliffites? No. These sects profess errors of a very different kind. The Albigenses taught that there were two gods and two Christs. They reprobated marriage, denied all the sacraments, as well as the resurrection of the body. The Waldensians aimed at plunder. They declared it a heinous sin for a magistrate to condemn to death for any crime. According to them, it was a mortal sin to take an oath. The clergy became reprobates by holding 1 farthing's worth of property. In other things, these deluded fanatics were Catholic. They held the sacraments, Mass, transubstantiation, and purgatory. The Wycliffites maintained that man must sin, that God approves of sin, yet with evident inconsistency, they declare that all power, whether of the priest or magistrate, is forfeited by the commission of one mortal sin. They concluded that as they themselves were all free from sin, so all power belonged to them. As to the Hussites, their doctrines were those of Wycliffe. Their principles were seditious and unchristian, and plunder was their object. Did Luther and his reforming brotherhood teach nothing in common with the Christian church then existing? A few of the great leading truths were still retained, but there was scarcely one article of the Christian faith which was not denied and rejected by one or other of the reformers. In what year was Luther born? In 1483. Where was he born? In Eisleben of Prussian Saxony. Of what religion were his parents? They were Catholics, and so were all his ancestors. At the time Luther was born, what was the religion of all Europe? All believed what the Catholics believe at the present time. Was Luther himself a Catholic for any time? He was a Catholic until his 35th year. What was his state of life? He was a monk of the order of Discalced Augustinians. As such, had he made religious vows? At the age of 23 years, he made vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Was he bound to keep these vows? Without a doubt, since he made them after mature reflection and of his own free will. Because the prophet says in Psalm 49, "Pay thy vows to the Most High." And God himself says in Numbers chapter 30, "If any man make a vow to the Lord or bind himself by an oath, he shall not make his word void, but shall fulfill all that he promised." Did Luther obey this command of God by keeping his vows? No, he violated all the three. He apostatized, he married Catherine de Bore, a nun, like himself under vows, and he positively disobeyed every ecclesiastical authority. Was this man in reality the founder of the Protestant religion, and the first of that sect that ever appeared in the world? Most certainly, for no minister, no congregation, no body of divines professing Protestant doctrines was ever heard of until his time. What inference do you draw from all this? That Protestantism cannot be the religion of Christ, because if the Church of Christ required reformation, a God of purity and holiness would never have chosen such an immoral character, an apostate, a wholesale vow-breaker, a sacrilegious seducer for that purpose. Section 2. What was it that induced Luther to attack the ancient Catholic faith and invent a new creed? Pride and jealousy. Pope Leo, having granted an indulgence, Luther's pride was mortified because the commission to preach that indulgence was given to the order of St. Dominic. To what did he allow himself to be driven by this pride and jealousy? To attack in itself the doctrine of indulgences. Would the Catholic Church have blamed Luther had he merely attacked the abuses or avarice of individual Catholics? No, certainly. He erred in this, but under pretense of reprehending abuses, he assailed the true faith on the subject of indulgences. What was his next step? He posted on the gates of the Church of Wittenberg 95 articles, which he wrote, and which contained many things not in accordance with the doctrines of the Church. Were these articles refuted? They were, odd with much cleverness, by some Catholic theologians, to whom Luther replied with a haughty insolence unworthy of a Christian. What hypocritical pretenses did Luther make in 1517 during these disputes? He pretended that he wished to teach nothing but what was conformable to Scripture, to the Holy Fathers, and approved by the Holy See. What did he write to Jerome, Bishop of Brandenburg? That he wished to decide nothing himself, that he wished to submit all his doctrines to the Church. What did he write to Pope Leo in 1518? That he would listen to that Pope's decision as to an oracle proceeding from the mouth of Jesus Christ. What did he promise to his religious superiors? That he would be silent if his adversaries were placed under the same restraint. What inference do you draw from all this? That he was either a hypocrite who did not intend to fulfill his promises, or that he was quite satisfied of the truth of the doctrines which he impugned, since otherwise he could not conscientiously promise silence and obedience. What other consequences do you draw? That a man bursting with pride, envy, jealousy, a disobedient hypocrite, was not the person to be chosen by God to reform abuses, if any such existed. Section 3. What took place at Augsburg between Luther and Cardinal Cajetan? The cardinal required of him that he should retract his errors, which Luther refused, appealing at the same time to the most celebrated universities of Germany and to that of Paris, and pledging himself most humbly to submit to their decision. Did he stand by that appeal? No. He appealed a short time after to the Pope. Did he abide by this second appeal? No. He next appealed from the Pope, ill-informed, to the Pope, well-informed. Did he even stop here? No. Then he appealed to a general council. Did he abide by this resolution to submit to the decision of a general council? No. At the Diet of Worms, he declared flatly that he would not submit his doctrine to any council. What do you conclude from such conduct? In the first place, that Luther must have been extremely fickle to appeal to so many judges, and to abide by the decisions of none. Secondly, that he knew his cause was bad and his doctrine false, since he would not submit it even to the best judges. Thirdly, that he must have been brimful of sinful pride and obstinacy, since he preferred his own single judgment to that of the whole Christian world. But did Luther not promise to abandon his errors if anyone would prove them such from Scripture? Yes, but this was only an artifice to enable him more freely to propagate them, because he well knew that these Scriptures may be wrested into any or every meaning, that he could give them any sense he pleased, as the Mormons, the Muckers, the Methodists, and the Free Kirkmen do at the present day. The Scripture is made to teach all sorts of contradictions. What was his real object in this subterfuge? He wished to impose his monstrous errors on the public, as truths bearing the sacred stamp of scriptural authority. Had he been sincere in his appeal, he would have said, "I shall leave it to the Church to decide whether my doctrine is conformable to the Scripture or not." What judgment did the universities to which Luther appealed pronounce upon his doctrine? They condemned his doctrine as false and heretical. What universities did so? The universities of Leipzig, Cologne, Louvain, and Paris. Did Luther abide as he had promised by their decision? No. On the contrary, he poured forth a torrent of invectives and insults against them. He called the University of Paris the mother of errors, the daughter of Antichrist, the gate of hell. What was the judgment of the Pope to whom Luther appealed, and whose decisions he promised to receive, as if they came from the mouth of Christ himself? The Pope published a bull condemning 41 articles of Luther's doctrine. What does the Pope say in that bull? That he had done everything he could to reclaim Luther, but that all his paternal cares and advices had been unavailing. He gives Luther 60 days to retract and orders his works to be burned at the expiry of that period, should he persist in his errors. Did Luther submit? No. He now renounces the authority to which he had appealed. He writes against the bull of his chief superior, whom he had vowed to obey. He denounces the papal decision as the decision of Antichrist. He publicly burns the bull along with the book of decretals. Had Luther previously written in the most submissive terms, declaring that he was willing to cast himself at the foot of His Holiness? Yes, but the moment the Pope opposed him, he changed his language, declaring not only the bull, but the Pope himself should be burned. Had Luther not written a little before that his preservation or destruction depended entirely on the absolution or condemnation of His Holiness? Yes, but he now declares that men must take up arms against the Pope, the cardinals, and bishops, and wash their hands in the blood of these dignitaries. Why, says he, do we not fall on those masters of perdition, the popes, cardinals, and bishops, with all our force, not give over till we have bathed our hands in their blood? If you fall, he elsewhere adds, before the beast has received its mortal wound, you will have but one thing to be sorry for, that you did not bury your dagger in its breast. All that defend him must be treated like a band of robbers, be they kings or be they Caesars. Had he not written before this time that the Pope and the Catholic Church are the highest spiritual authority on earth? Yes, but he now teaches that none but those who oppose the papal authority can be saved. What do you now think of Luther's conduct? I can discover nothing in it but the spirit of inconstancy, doubt, error, and revenge, without even the slightest mark of the Spirit of God. What did the secular power do to suppress the rising heresy? The Emperor Charles V cited Luther to appear before the Diet of Worms, and sought to proclaim him by the mildest means. What reply did Luther make to the order of the Emperor? He replied that from the wording of the order, one would suppose the emperor to be either a maniac or a demoniac. Why was not Luther confined to prevent him from corrupting others and from exciting disturbance? He had received the assurance of a safe conduct, and the civil authorities could not break their promise. When, however, the term of the safe conduct had expired, the emperor prescribed Luther as a sectarian, cut off from the body of the church. Whither did Luther then retire? To the castle of Württemberg, where he wrote the most false and pernicious works. What was the effect of these works, in which he spoke of nothing but evangelical liberty? These works produced disturbances, sedition, and amongst other evils, the German war of the peasants, who committed every sort of excess, declaring that the rich had no exclusive right to their properties, that everything should be held in common, because in the second chapter of the Acts, it is said that all property was common among the first Christians. Did other divisions and schisms soon appear amongst the Lutherans? Yes. Each disciple of Luther thought he had as good a right as his master to expound the scripture according to his own peculiar whim. Karlstadt, Zwinglius, Calvin, Munzer, Zwickenfeld were of this opinion. They interpreted for themselves, denounced their master, and open religious hucksteries for themselves. Did the religion invented by Luther continue thus to give rise to new and differing sects? Yes, every year gave rise to some new one. A short period produced 34 different sects, and even to this day the religion of Luther is as prolific as ever. Witness the Mormons on the Freekirk. So true is it that when we once abandon truth, there can be no end to our wanderings in the mazes of error, that when we once break the moorings which tied us to the rock of truth, by the adoption of a false principle, such as that of private interpretation, we are only the prey of endless, ever-varying, erroneous human opinions, tossed to and fro on a wide ocean of contradictions and contrarieties. Today on one tack, tomorrow upon another, certain of nothing but ultimate shipwreck on the rock of infidelity, or the quicksands of heresy and schism. Calvinism is now running fast into Socianism and socialism. What lesson do you learn from this portion of Luther's conduct? Let the man who willfully disobey all his superiors, both ecclesiastical and civil, the man who perverts the sacred scripture for the purpose of exciting sedition and propagating evident heresy and schism, cannot possibly be the ambassador of heaven. Section 5. What means did Luther resort to for the purpose of supplying his new church with priests, seeing that no bishop could or would ordain any of his followers? He invented a new doctrine on that subject, a doctrine never known in the church till his time. What was that doctrine? That all Christians, men, women, and children, even infants, were truly and really priests, and that nothing was wanting to them but presentation to a charge. Upon what did he found this unheard-of doctrine? Upon that passage of St. Peter, "You are a royal priesthood." St. Peter, he reasoned, addresses this to all Christians. Therefore, all Christians are priests. He might equally well have proved from the same passage that all Christians are kings, since St. Peter declares that they are all royal. Hence, as all Christians are confessedly not kings, so neither are they all priests. Hence, again, all the followers of Luther should be satisfied that their pretended pastors are only wolves in sheep's clothing, who entered the fold, not by the door, but over the wall, since they pretended orders and mission are founded upon a passage of Scripture evidently perverted to suit the purpose. What was Luther's next step after abolishing the true priesthood among his followers? He next abolished the true sacrifice. What did he allege against the sacrifice of the Mass? Various things which he learned from the devil, as he himself declares. How does he express himself on that subject in his book on the Mass? Having awoke, he says, about midnight, the devil commenced a dispute with me on the subject of the Mass. What did the devil say to him? "Listen, most saintly doctor," said the Father of Lies. "During 15 years you have said Mass almost every day. What if all these acts have been only so many acts of idolatry?" Did Luther hearken to the paternal advice of his sable director? He listened so well that he allowed himself to be persuaded that the devil was right and he wrong, so that the enemy of man came off victor. And though Luther in the same book, calls the devil the most artful and lying deceiver. He here chose to follow the advice of the devil rather than that of the Church. But think you all of this? One can hardly tell at which to be most astonished, at the open and brazen avowal of Luther, or at the artful blindness of those who follow a master, who, by his own account, received his training and instruction in the school of Satan.